I think it was just a pretty natural thing to happen. I'm a career heel. He's a heel. I mean, if you watch him work, you would think he is many years further along than he is. Some people just get it.
He said, "You're the first match on the pay-per-view tomorrow night." I thought he was totally joking.
Me and EC3 were standing beside each other watching it in the back. We were like mom and dad, like we were so proud, you know what I mean?
If you can ever work people from the Attitude Era, it's totally the best. Bubba knows how to work every ounce of energy out of the crowd that you can get out of.
It was just a very easy thing for us to do, and I think we were just very believable, which I think really helped.
When I met her, I didn't even know who she was.
That is semi-true.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interview.
My guest today is a rising star with about 3 years under his belt, wrestling in companies like NWA, AEW, just to name a few, with a ton of hype around his name as one half of Psycho Love, alongside Angelina Love, his wife, who will be joining us later. Please welcome Psycho Boy Fodder.
Yo, what's up, man? Thanks for having me, dude.
No, of course. Thank you for being here. And I'm really excited to dive into your journey because I feel like you blew up on the scene. Around 2021 was your official debut, and you've really just been rising since. You've been in there with some huge names. I've heard you say you grew up a fan of wrestling. What are some of your earliest memories, though?
Oh, man, my old man taking me to the videotape store. This is back when they had actual stores where you could go to and rent VHS tapes. I mean, we used to rent the old Coliseum home videos, man. I mean, when they had like the best of like Bret Hart or the best of Hulk Hogan or the Ultimate Warrior. Um, but man, my earliest memories are like, Monday Night Raw. I mean, just the early Monday Night Raws, like the 93, the
Mm.
94, 95 Monday Night Raws. I mean, I can remember, man, like, dude, I mean, I remember when like Mankind debuted, and that was like a big deal,
Yeah.
so going way back. I mean, I'm 38 years old,
Okay.
so my wrestling is, late 80s all through the 90s, through the Attitude Era, up until now today.
Wow. No, I mean they're such larger than life back then too. I mean, getting into it at that time, I could see how you'd stay a fan for sure. And especially being able to watch that transition from Raw being more family friendly to like as you age too, right? More on the edgier side.
Oh, sure, man. Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, is when like the Attitude Era was really, kicking off. I'd say like middle school into high school. Um, and man, I mean, that was obviously the best era of wrestling, when you
Easily.
had
Yeah.
WCW, NWO, the Attitude Era of Raw, Steve Austin, The Rock. I mean, all the players, man, that really made wrestling what it is now today.
No, it was so cool. And for you personally, so you were a fan, but you didn't immediately go into the world of wrestling. I heard that you did competitive bodybuilding first, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I actually, like my journey in wrestling was sort of a little all over the place. Like when I was growing up, that's all I wanted to do was be a pro wrestler. And when I was in sixth grade in middle school, my art teacher was actually a pro wrestler, and he ended up
Oh,
like
wow.
doing work for like TNA, and he was doing work for like NWA Wildside. I mean, he was running around with like, Jeff Hardy and CW Anderson and
Oh, wow.
Lodi, Shannon Moore, like all of those guys. His name was Laz in
Okay.
TNA. So he used to do like the face paint gimmick, and he wore like the skirt and like all that type of jazz. And he was my art teacher in sixth grade, and he had actually got me into wrestling school when I was 16 years old. Now he lied and told him I was 18, I believe, and they told me I couldn't come back until I was 18. So I'd say from around 16, 17 years old until I actually got back into it, I kind of had a dip there where I just wasn't as interested in it anymore, like any 18-year-old, right? Like
Of course.
I'd,
Yeah.
say if I was 16 and I was in the school and that's all I did, I mean, my life might be very different than it is today, right? but
Yeah.
I think just that little setback allowed me to get into it later. And I got into it later on, man. Just I had been doing competitive bodybuilding, and my outside businesses were in the supplement world.
Mm.
And I remember I was at the gym and I saw an advertisement on like the little screens in the gym. It was like, "Do you want to be a pro wrestler? Call this phone number," or whatever. So I remember the guy who was my art teacher, who I'd always kept in contact with. I text him and I said, "Do you know the person who runs this school?" And he goes, "Yeah, I know who the guy is," or whatever. So he got me in the school. And when I initially had went to the school, I was like, "Hey, dude, like, look, I just want to do this like as a hobby
Hmm.
once a week, like on a Sunday. I'm just trying to like do something to just kind of stay more limber, because like when you're a bodybuilder, you just kind of are used to just doing motions, where you're just doing motions one way all the time, and you kind of become like real stiff and just not as like flexible and agile as you would be like in other athletics, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I just told him, I was like, I just want to like kind of stay more agile, and you know, I've been doing bodybuilding forever, so I just don't want to be like real stiff all the time. And he kind of looked at me like I was insane, because he's like, well, like anybody who comes here, like they're all trying to go like the WWE. And that was one of the things I told him. I was like, I'm for sure like not trying to go to WWE. Like I just want to do this as a hobby. And then I started doing it and just kind of turned out to what I'm doing now today, which is kind of totally crazy to me.
That's such a cool journey too. Like, yeah, you really did. You took a different road than most take, but everyone's journey is obviously different. Do you ever contact that art teacher again? Tell him where you're at
Oh
now.
yeah, yeah. Dude, I just talked to him 2 days ago. We were
Oh,
just
there you
talking,
go.
So yeah, so he's kind of been with me kind of like the whole journey. And like one good thing about like knowing him and having him is like he he's kind of done the whole wrestling thing, and like
Mhm.
now he's like a professor at a college and he teaches art. And I mean, he's a really smart guy. But one thing about taking advice or lessons from him is like he's not in the business anymore, and he doesn't care about wrestling or the wrestling business anymore. So I know that when he gives me advice, it's for my best interest.
Yeah.
One of the first pieces of advice that he ever gave me getting involved in the wrestling business is he said, you're probably going to go places fast because of how you look. He said, don't let other people hold you back. You know what I mean? He was like, there's a lot of like schools, and like when guys get involved with schools, the schools have training shows, and you know, the the schools tell the kids like they can't go wrestle over at this place or that place, because and he said, man, don't listen to that. He said, anybody that tells you that doesn't have your best interests in mind. So just all those little jewels that he would be able to give me um allowed me to kind of make the best decisions for myself while I was doing this.
Yeah, and so you mentioned a great mentor to have definitely along the way, and it's cool that he's all the way since your childhood too. You mentioned he said you were going to go far because of the way you look, and that I'm assuming came heavily from the bodybuilding world. For someone who's not really familiar with that world, what does it take to prepare for those competitions, and what kind of toll does that take on your body?
I mean, bodybuilding is everything, right? Like it's the number one thing about bodybuilding, man, is just it's just all discipline, man.
Okay.
It's all right here, right? So go into you have to be able to go into any kind of competition with the mindset of like I'm willing to do whatever it takes to win. And I always tell people that it's good for everybody to do one bodybuilding contest in their entire life, because a bodybuilding contest really pushes you to your absolute limit. Um, and by limit, I mean like, obviously you're limited in what you're allowed to eat. You're limited in um, what you can do in terms of like, well, I need to get this much sleep to recover properly. and I need to make sure I do all my workouts, and I need to make sure I do my cardio even when I'm tired and whatnot. So bodybuilding just gives you the discipline, man, to really go in and hone in for what you want. So even when you go to a show, bodybuilding is obviously judged by judges, and it's like judges' preference and all of these. It's bodybuilding is very subjective, right? So,
Yeah.
one judge might want the competitor like, oh, like, I don't like the competitor as hard as like a different competitor in terms of like how tight their skin is, or just
Mhm.
various things that go with the body and the looks. When you're standing under the lights, you you have to leave no stone unturned, so that when you go up there and somebody else makes the decision for you, you can go, man, I did everything possible to win this show, and it either is going to go my way or it's not going to go my way. But no matter what, I did everything possible. And that's what you're able to walk away with every time.
Really cool tools. Do you think you're using any of those as you transition now into the world of wrestling more?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think having the discipline, man,
Mhm.
really, it's like when any company, right? When they look at a talent, I always use this when I talk to people too, man. Is like, a lot of guys say like, man, like WWE, like all they hire now is like college athletes.
Right.
Like they don't hire indie wrestlers anymore. Um, and it's just like when they look at college athletes, they're looking at people who have been on teams, they're coachable, they have discipline, right? Because like they need to be like in shape. Like pro wrestling is weird in some ways because like anybody can sign up to be a pro wrestler.
Yeah.
Like literally anybody. Like the wrestling schools will literally take anybody, but not as long as you got $150 or whatever the price is,
Then they got
you
you.
can train, you
Yeah.
can go to a pro wrestling school and train to be a pro wrestler.
Right.
But you cannot go to the NFL and say, can I pay you $150 a month and I'm just going to train here and like I'm going to be like part of the team and like do all this, right? Like
Really
the
good point.
NFL,
Yeah.
yeah, the NFL just wants the best football players.
Right.
Like they don't care what you like, they don't care what guys look like. They don't care about like, all of these different things. They just want the best guys that are going to make the football team better. That's all they care about, right? And pro wrestling is just different because it's just like I said, like anybody with $150 can go and sign up. And then the next thing you know, like you just got like just guys out on the indies, man, who just like don't know what they're doing, or they're unsafe. I mean, like there's a lot that goes into professional wrestling. And just to kind of like go back to like what I was saying about like WWE is like WWE is literally bringing people there. They are bringing people in who, again, they got discipline. They know how to be coached because they've been on teams where they have to be coached. They know how to be team players and, work with teammates and things like that, right? They have all the intangibles that WWE can take and go like, this person is perfect right here. They're in shape, they're coachable, they know how to eat a proper diet, they know how to do this, do that, whatever. And we're going to bring them in, and all we have to do is teach them how to wrestle. And by the way, we don't have to break them of any bad habits because they're a bad indie wrestler. We
Mhm.
can just teach them how to wrestle however we want because they don't know anything about professional wrestling. And that's exactly why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So when like what I was telling you is like, how does discipline help you in wrestling? Like, well, discipline helps me a ton in wrestling, right? Because like it allows me to like know how to be in shape, know how to be coachable, like just all the things, man, that bring you up in the business.
No, for sure. And so you're using those tools. No, so you definitely came from a world of discipline already. Can you tell me when along the way you met EC3? Because I know he played a big part in your journey as well, getting
Oh,
into the
sure.
actual wrestling world. I know you got a phone call, I think, under a year into your career from him. That seems to have changed the whole trajectory. So can you talk about that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, EC3 is my pal.
Yeah.
And so he called me. So this was right after he got let go from WWE, but I had known him before that because, I have a couple supplement companies and I used to send EC3 and lots of the boys. I used to send them free supplements because like I mean who better to like use your stuff and market your stuff than like people that are athletes, professional wrestlers, um and he just called me and was just like, hey man, he's like, you still doing like you still like kind of like messing around with the wrestling stuff. I was like, yeah dude. And he goes, we're doing this thing down in Florida. And this ended up airing like on Impact. And he was like, I really need somebody to like kind of fight me in this thing that we're doing. I think at the time, like he didn't really even know what to call it.
Yeah.
He was like, it's just like gonna be like a piece of art. So this was on a Wednesday, and this was kind of like my first taste of the wrestling business. Wrestling's very unorganized.
Hmm.
It's very all over the place. It's very, last minute all the time with a lot of things. And this was a Wednesday, and he goes, you think you can be here like Saturday, like in Florida, in Orlando? I
Hmm.
was just like, yeah. So, I mean, I had like 2 days to figure out like whether I was going to do it or not. I flew down there. That's where I met Adam or Braun Strowman.
Hmm.
That's where I met Spud and Moose and all these guys for the first time. And, we did the kind of garage fight type deal that ended up airing on TNA, and then EC3 wanted to do the like control your narrative one, and the first one had like me, John Schuyler, Moose, Seidel, Cardona,
Right.
and it had quite a few guys in that. And then the second one had like me and Adam and Weston Blake and a lot of different guys in that one. And then right after that is when we did the like the invasion thing, like at Ring of Honor. And then right after the Ring of Honor thing is when AEW had called me. So it was just kind of like a domino effect of just how fast everything happened.
No, that was really snowballing. And also so early in your career being around the names you just mentioned too. I'm sure that must have been great for reassurance and also just advice along the way. Can you talk about that? What was it like being around those names?
Oh man, I mean, dude, I mean, anytime you can be around people that know what they're talking about, man. I mean, that's the best. That's the best learning tool that you have. Um, so like, for me, because I had already kind of built a life for myself outside of wrestling, um, I didn't know anything like, dude, like I grew up watching like WWF. Like I didn't even know anything about like the indies or like just anything like that. I mean, when I was younger, my dad took me like, dude, it's crazy that me and you were talking about like CW, right?
Yeah.
Like, dude, I have pictures of me with CW when I was like 13 years old.
Oh, that's
When
crazy.
my dad used to take me to a place in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is about an hour from where we lived at, called Southern Championship Wrestling, which was an indie. But at my age, I did not know what the indies were. I just knew we were going to a wrestling show, right? And that's where I met like Shane Helms and Shannon Moore and Lodi and
Mhm.
C.W. Anderson. And I have pictures of like me with them when I was like 13 years old.
Yeah.
So how life kind of comes full circle
That's got to be like
later.
a pinch me moment having such a good relationship with them now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and Lodi kind of helped train me some. But getting back into it like later on in EC3, like introducing me to all these guys, I didn't really know anything about the indies then.
Mhm.
And when I started learning about what the indies were, I remember I had just thought to myself, like I know what I can do. if people that work at companies like a AEW or like a TNA or like a Ring of Honor, or like if they're allowed to go do indies,
Yeah.
then I can just bring them in myself, let the promoter keep the ticket money. Then I can bring my cameraman in and have my cameraman record it, and me and him can edit it, and then I can put it on my YouTube channel, and then I get the match with the name, and then I get the experience working with the TV guy, which is going to help me in the ring, right?
Yeah.
And then I can put that on YouTube, and then I can just leech off of those guys' names. I can just leech off of the fans who already know them, and that's how they're going to find me. That was my whole philosophy, right? Is like, if you want people to view you as a television wrestler, what's the best way to do that? Well, just only work TV guys.
Yeah.
Don't work guys that don't nobody know, that nobody knows. I'm just only going to work TV guys, and that's what I did for a whole year. Is I would just bring 2 TV guys in a month, and I would just work the TV guys, and then like before I knew it, before I knew it, people were just like, oh, like they just associate you with being a TV guy because that's all you wrestle, guys that wrestle on TV, right? So by doing that, before you know it, then you are working on TV, because then once you get really good, then the guys that you're working, and like I tell people this all the time, wrestling is a recommendations business,
Mm-hmm.
because the people that are recommending you are typically the people that are going to have to work with you in the ring, right? So you're working TV guys and you're good, and then TV guys go to TV, and then they recommend you to come work at TV.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, then you're working on TV. And that was my whole philosophy behind it.
I think that's such a genius move to be able to, and so outside the box too. Was anyone else doing that at the time, bringing in their own talent and booking them like that?
Nothing, I mean, not that I know of. I mean, I don't know anybody that even does it now. I mean,
Yeah,
booking your own talent like that really means you got to have the finances to do it.
of course.
Um, I mean, luckily for me, I have, built you know, life outside of wrestling that allowed me to do that. Um, but like I tell everybody, like everybody's paying their dues in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, and like, yeah, maybe I didn't ride the roads, for 10 years, working the indies to make it to WWE, right? But, you know, maybe I suffered with the diet and the training and all those type of things when I was bodybuilding to get me to the point of where I was at, to then allow me to be able to do what I've done in wrestling, right? So like to me it's all relative. There was a guy who used to work with WWE that I would talk to frequently. He was brought in and he worked on TV for a while, but he was brought in from the football world.
Okay.
And I remember he told me, that he had felt like that there were some people that felt like he didn't pay his dues, because he came in from football and this, that, and the third. But like he told me, he said, but man, dude, he said, I just paid my dues in a different way.
Yeah.
He said, I paid my dues to make it to the NFL. He said, and it just so happens that I ended up here in the WWE. But everybody's got a different journey. Everybody's got a different path that leads them wherever they're going, right? So
Of
it's
course.
just it's an interesting thing.
No, and it's really interesting you say that too. Like you see now more than ever with WWE specifically bringing in people who have, carved their own paths and have their own success in other ways, like a Logan Paul or a Bad Bunny, or like those people who have tools that they learned in other avenues that they're now bringing to
Sure.
WWE and building the business like that. And very similar to what you're talking about now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Most definitely.
Well, your rise continued. So you said from the CYN stuff, you were able to go to AEW, and then you went to NWA not long after. And another friend helped you out there, Ricky Morton. Can you talk about how he helped you get your foot in the door with NWA?
Yeah, man, I love Ricky Morton. Ricky Morton was in my wedding, and
Oh,
I mean,
very cool.
Yeah, he's always been a good brother to me. I worked Ricky Morton on an indie. Um, and like, man, we were just kind of hanging out. And I remember Ricky Morton, he just told me, he was like, you know what, fella? He was like, you should be working on TV. And I said, yeah, man. I said, well, give me a job working on TV, man. Like, let me know when you can do that, you know?
Yeah.
And, we're just kind of just joking around, just being brothers, you know? And man, one day he just, this was actually the NWA 74 pay-per-view that was in St. Louis. He called me on a Friday night. This was the Friday before they have the pay-per-views on the Saturday and the Sunday.
Yeah.
Called me that Friday. He goes, hey, can you be in Nashville on Monday? And I said, yeah. So what do you need? He said, well, NWA, we're doing TV tapings in Nashville after the pay-per-view, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. He said, can you be there? And I said, I'll be there. So EC3 was already the 74 pay-per-view was where he was making his debut.
Mhm.
So I called EC3 and I said, hey, Ricky Morton called me, told me to come to Nashville. I was like, what do you think? And he goes, yeah, man. He goes, if Ricky tells you to come, he was like, you come. He was like, I'm gonna put in the word for you. And there were already a lot of guys there that I had worked with, like Johnny Swinger and
Right. Yeah.
Ricky's son Kerry and Ricky and EC3. And I showed up and Ricky introduced me to Billy. And obviously EC3 had talked to Billy about me. And Billy said, yeah, man, a lot of guys have brought you up about working here. He said, how about tomorrow you do a match? So uh, I worked a guy, Joe Ocasio, who's a very good worker. Me and him did a match, and it was supposed to just kind of like just be a dark match that they were going to film. They ended up using this match on the actual TV program.
Okay.
But I did the match with him, and essentially, like as soon as I came in the back, they just hired me.
Wow.
That was that
Wow.
fast. Yeah. I mean, like I did the match with him and like Billy and Pat Kenny and a few other people were, I think Dr. Tom was back there.
Mhm.
And essentially I was just kind of like verbally hired right there.
Wow. All those investments like probably paying off in your mind at that moment too, like bringing in that talent, working them, gaining that experience because you were still so young into your
Sure.
career when they, I guess, verbally hired you then, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd been working for 2 years maybe.
Okay.
Um, and I mean, Ocasio was the perfect guy to wrestle me because he was really good. And I just felt like me and him had really good chemistry and he looked good. And I felt like I felt like I looked good too. And I was just like, yo, man, like I think me and you can have a really good match. We had a 6 minute match. Most TV matches are like 6 minutes or less.
Yeah.
And I felt like we just knocked it out of the park. And they verbally hired me then that day. And then that's when I met my wife, was same day. And not long after that, me and her just started doing the gimmick together. So the first time we did the gimmick together, like we met at NWA and then we kind of just never stopped talking. And after I was working some of those district championship wrestling shows in Atlanta.
Okay.
And they had me kind of like in a program with the factory with QT in them.
Yep. Yeah.
And I worked Camarado Nick Camarado on a show in the main event. And then the next show I was working QT Marshall. And that's where me and her debuted the Psycho Love gimmick, like for the first time. And then after that, like we did the gimmick there. We sent it to NWA and they were like, we want to use it here. Since you both are already here, we might as well just do it here. And then we started doing it there. And I think our first time doing it on like actual like TV was when we did the attack on Latimer and Camille.
Okay. And that's a perfect transition. I really want to get into some matches that people I think should definitely check out of yours viewers watching. One of them is that Singapore Cane match, you and Thom Latimer to open.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was I mean, it was brutal. I watched it earlier. Can you talk about what goes into kind of making a match like that stand out and also the significance of opening up a pay-per-view like that?
Okay, so that was my first pay-per-view. And I remember we got to Tampa. Me and my wife got to Tampa and we came in the hotel and Kerry Morton came up to me and he said, "Oh, guess what, man?" He said, "You're the first match on the pay-per-view tomorrow night." And I was just like, "Oh, you're joking, you know." I thought he was totally joking.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like we got there the next day and I get the run sheet from Dr. Tom, first match on the pay-per-view. And I was just like, oh, I was like, I cannot believe they got us opening the pay-per-view. Because there's a lot of pressure when you're opening the pay-per-view, right? Because you kind of have to set the tone for what the pay-per-view is going to be.
Yeah.
Um, and Dr. Tom was the agent on our match. Latimer was a guy who I had always wanted to work with. And this was like our first match. And I think both me and him were thinking like our first match being a Singapore cane match is kind of wild,
Yeah.
but we'll make it work, right? Um, because when you have your first match with a guy, you kind of just want to kind of get a feel for him and see how he works and all that. And it's just like, man, straight to the weapons, brother. So the Singapore cane match, I think the real key with that, putting that match together, um, was not using the cane until very late into the match. So it's figuring out how to not blow your load early.
Yeah.
Because it's like if you start the match and you just start whacking each other with the canes, they really lose the oomph that you have behind them. If you do it really early. But if you just let it build and then you just have that one late, that means a lot more than
Yeah.
just whacking each other the whole match with them. And we had watched a lot of matches where guys early on were just whacking each other with the canes really early, and then you could just see the crowd would slowly taper off throughout the rest of the match, right?
Yeah.
So that Doc's idea was, hey, let's do it like this. Let's keep the cane shots until later. They'll mean more when you do it later, and then we'll get right to the finish. And I mean, I thought it went great. I mean, I remember that day was probably important to me. The thing about wrestling, man, is wrestling's going really fast. It's going like at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So like it's like you do the pay-per-view and then the pay-per-view's over, man. And then the next day you got TV tapings. And then the next day you got TV tapings. And you really never have any time for anything to kind of sit with you
Right.
because you're just on to the next thing, right? Um, but I remember Ricky Morton texted me after the pay-per-view and he told me, he said, "You really delivered tonight." And Nasty Boy Knobs was at the pay-per-view in the back. And he came up to me and he said, "Man, I heard this was your first pay-per-view match." He was like, "You killed it, dude." And Bobby Fulton came and talked to me, and uh Bubba came and talked to me.
Dude.
So it was really cool to be there, to be able to do it, to have my wife with me. She had a big match that night too, her and Camille in the no DQ match. And to just for everything to just go smooth
Yeah.
and everyone was happy with everything and the match was good. Um, that was a good day for me for sure.
I love the amount of legends that it seemed just flock to you. Like every time
It's
you tell, it's crazy. And again, it must be that pinch me type of thing. But
sure.
these words of wisdom and these encouragements that you're getting from like these massive names in the business.
Dude, I mean, I think just working and hanging with the real legendary wrestlers. Like I'm talking about like the Attitude Era wrestlers and
Yeah.
guys like that, right? There's just so much you can learn, man, if you just take the time to learn. Like I mean, so many people, like everybody just thinks they know it all. And it's like, I don't want to know it all, man. I want to know what you can tell me and what you can tell me and what you can tell me and what you can tell me. And I mean, it is cool sometimes to see the guys that you watch. Like, dude, I used to watch the Nasty Boys on like Coliseum home video, dude.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So to see them or hang out with them or have them compliment me, that's a big deal, you know?
Definitely. Yeah.
Most definitely.
Another match I want to talk about is you sent me earlier. I don't know if it's been released to the public other than the people that saw it live there, but Bully Ray and you had an awesome, awesome match. I thought that was excellent. I loved the crowd reactions. I mean, they sounded very loud. I don't know if Bully was announced or not, but they sounded like they were very happy to see him, and you got put through a table in the process. So can you just take us through the whole match, what it felt like being in there with a legend like Bully?
I mean, so if you want to watch the match, it's on Title Match Network.
Okay.
It's if you look up AML Wrestling, it's AML Wrestling Talk is Cheap pay-per-view. Yeah, me and Bully were announced. He was kind of the final guy in a series of guys that I was wrestling. Yeah, Brian Hawks. Brian Hawks is the general manager. Uh, I wrestled EC3 at the WrestleCade uh pay-per-view or the WrestleCade Super Show. I beat EC3 for the NWA title. This guy comes out, he reverses the decision. EC3 then somehow pins me. I don't know how that happened. Um, you harken back to the February pay-per-view rise to the top with AML Wrestling. I attack the general manager, Brian Hawks. They suspend me for 2 months. They bring me back. I work a tag match. It's me and John Schuyler from TNA against the Outrunners. We beat the Outrunners. He brings in Too Cold Scorpio to try to teach me a lesson. We pin Scorpio. He brings in Rhino, and Rhino, and then he brings in Bubba Ray as kind of the uh, final boss,
Yeah.
and makes himself the special guest referee. And
That was, I don't know if that was fair or not, but hearing the
I don't know, man. I mean,
yeah.
it seemed like it was a 2-on-1, but I may have I may have done it to myself over time. But working Bubba was great, man. I mean, I always say, man, like any if you can ever work people from the Attitude Era, it's the
Yeah.
best. It's totally the best, man. Like, um, Bubba knows how to work every ounce of energy out of the crowd that you can get out of. That was working him was not only the easiest wrestling match I've ever done. If you take wrestling, I would say like that's not my best wrestling match
Mhm.
in terms of like if I was in the ring doing the moves, but it's my best wrestling match if you factor in everything,
Yeah.
story, moments, crowd, all the things, right? That is what wrestling is. Wrestling's not just the movements in the ring. It's like I tell guys, like, you know, I I told this to somebody, maybe it was 5 or 6 days ago, and I said, you know, WWE Raw is a TV show with wrestling on it.
Mhm.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And the wrestling is just a vehicle to keep the stories going, like the actual in-ring stuff, right? So the moves and all the things, they like if when you got a really good story going, none of it matters.
Yeah.
The moves, the sequences, I know how to do all these spots. I'm not saying it's not cool because there's plenty of guys that can do stuff in the ring, like physically that I just can't do. But what I've kind of learned is like if you've got a story and the crowd is really into it, man, you can almost do absolutely nothing in the ring if you know what you're doing on how to draw that emotion out of people. And like that's what Bubba did. If you watch that match, I mean, those people are at like fever pitch level. There's
Yep.
probably 1,500 people there, right?
Okay.
The place is completely packed. I mean, you watched the match, right? It's like the place is completely packed. They're totally behind him. They're totally booing me out of the building, right? And it's like, I mean, we got a good story, we got moments, and it's just like the match is all about the moments.
Yeah.
You know, the moment where I go to do the leg drop and accidentally run into the referee.
Hmm.
And he goes, "Whoa, man, I didn't mean to do it." And then I lose my mind and I push him down and I go, "Fuck you, man," like whatever, right? To a boom, hitting the deal on Bubba. And then I pin Bubba and he goes 1, 2, and he just stops. And you can literally hear the crowd just coming up because they know what's getting ready to happen, right? And they're just like, it's almost like they're waiting for it. And then he goes, "Key man," and the place explodes. And it's like, it's the moment.
Yeah.
It's not drop down leapfrog, hip toss, Canadian destroyer. Nobody remembers that. Everybody remembers, oh, Bubba put Fodder through the table.
Yep.
I
Exactly.
remember that. Or Bubba and the referee did the was up. That's the stuff people remember. So working with guys like him, you go like, this guy is literally teaching me like just smoke and mirrors, like how to draw the most out of people and be the best at your job without totally killing yourself
Yeah.
or risking your health or whatever. Because
Right.
wrestling's a dangerous business, man. Whether you're just taking bumps from a clothesline or you're jumping off a ladder, it's all stuff that physically hurts your body.
Yeah. I mean, everything you're saying is so true too. Like from someone who didn't follow everything that you mentioned in that storyline between you and the referee. I got it, from that match. I feel like everything that you needed was right there for you to understand how important that match was, and it finished it off, and it was a
Sure.
really well story told. And you're right, that
Thank
crowd
you.
was so loud. And someone else who was a part of that match as well was your wife, Angelina Love, who I'd
Yeah.
love to bring out now. You need
Sure.
no introduction, but if anyone's been living under a rock, 7-time world champion, other half of Psycho Love, the Psycho Girl, Angelina Love. How are you?
Hello.
Hello. Well, we were just talking about Fodder's match with Bully Ray that you were a part of as well, and you have a long history with Bully, of course, from TNA. What were your thoughts on that match?
Oh, I mean, it was very loud,
Yeah.
very, very entertaining. And it's really great too, because I'm sure, like he said, that match, it was not a ton of moves and spots, and there were zero flips and, but it was just like beyond entertaining. And
Yeah.
that is what you want to do as a wrestler is, bring the crowd into it, get to their reactions. And they want, because they want to give you their reactions. They don't want to sit there in silence and just not be paid attention to and just watch a million things happen. So yeah, and I've known Bubba forever.
Right.
So I knew that it would be fun for everyone for sure. And I mean, it was so loud. It was the loudest I've ever heard an AML crowd.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and the story, it was all right there. We were just saying from not even seeing the rest of it. I feel like I got it all from that match. You mentioned, so you've known Bubba forever. How's your relationship with Bubba been over the years, especially with you both being such big names of TNA?
Oh, fine. I mean, I first met him and Devon probably the first or second time I went backstage at WWE, probably back in
Oh, so
04,
it's
oh
been a
05.
while. Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure. And he's a very intimidating person, but like when you actually get to know him, he's just a big goof. And I mean, like what him and Devon were there when we all first started like the knockouts division, and he's just really easy to joke around with. He's silly, very knowledgeable about the business, very smart, just knows how to make the crowd hate him if he's a heel and make everybody love him if he's a baby face. He just
Yeah.
gets everything. Um, and he's always down for helping people and teaching people, and because he's pretty much done everything. So
Well, we heard Fodder speak about the first time we saw Psycho Love debut, but I'd love to hear from you, Angelina, from your perspective, the formation of Psycho Love and everything that went into it, and the lead up to the debut, how you think it went.
I mean, I think it was just a pretty natural thing to happen. Um, you know, when I think you had suggested that we do something together, right?
Yeah.
Manage you. Yeah. And it was just like, well, yeah, of course, like, why wouldn't we? You know, I'm a career heel. He's a heel. So yeah, I mean, the first time we did it, we got great video footage. We were both at NWA at the time. So just gave them that and we were like, yo, like this would be something cool to do on your program. Like we can really make it something. And I mean, I think the next time we were at TV, they were like, go for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the first I think it was the first Power Live. It was in
Knoxville.
Knoxville, Tennessee. Yeah.
Okay. And I've heard you say, Fodder, like you guys are crazy busy with the amount of appearances that you're doing with it too. I'm sure like the package deal really appeals to people to bring you both in.
Oh, sure, man. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, because we can do everything, right? Like
Yeah.
we have a lot of options. So, I can work, she can manage me, we can both work singles, we can do mixed tags. I mean, we can do a little bit of everything for the show. So a lot of different options for the bookers out there.
Are there any other like big power couple type teams on the indies right now? Trying to think. Are you guys?
These,
You just mean guy girl in general?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, Cardona and Delander were doing their thing
Oh yeah,
for
that's
quite a
true,
while.
right? Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they're not a couple, but
yeah, they're not a couple,
they
but
are.
I mean, I just mean if you're just talking guy girl,
I
like
think yeah.
duos.
Yeah, but the couple aspect I think really drives it home though for sure. I mean, I'm sure it adds a whole new level of dynamic between you two and talking about things both while you're there and then at home too. Like it
Oh, sure.
helps.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um well, we mentioned so you and Bubba from TNA earlier, Angelina. On the topic of TNA, right now we're seeing this partnership with WWE and TNA happening. I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on it. And when you were with TNA, were there any whispers of anything like this happening?
No, no, because like that was, I mean, what did TNA formed in 2002? I mean, I started there in 2007. So it was, I mean, to my knowledge, WWE and TNA were not trying to be friends at all. It was like, you know what I mean? Like, and we were doing really good on Spike TV. We were getting like 1.5 million viewers, on our show. And like then the Ultimate Fighter was coming on after us. So I do believe they liked the gimmick and tried to recreate once or twice with their own people. Which was cool, obviously, because I mean they were obviously watching and paying attention and liked what we were doing. So yeah, so it's very interesting doing that now. I think it's just like, man, like sure, like companies can compete against each other, for 20 years, but like at some point it's like, I don't know, man, like wouldn't it be cool if like that's how you get buzz, that's how you get new news stories and people like really paying attention and going like, oh my gosh, like somebody from this show just did a run in on the main event in a totally
Yeah.
other company. You know what I mean? Like that's a really big deal thing. It's a really good way to get headlines, and I'm sure it's very exciting for all the talent too.
No, absolutely. I don't know if you caught at the Royal Rumble when Jordan Grace came out or the year before where they announced Mickey James, but still like that shock value of having, like you said, someone from another company come out is it adds a whole new layer.
It does for sure. And it's just like I said, over time you just kind of gotta dip your toes in that water and just see how it goes. And everybody, especially on social media, thinks that stuff is such a big deal. So, might as well give it to them sometimes.
No, right. Give them what they're asking for. Well, Fodder, for you as someone on the rise right now, what is that partnership? What do you think of that? And also, just the landscape of wrestling right now overall. I feel like it's on fire.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling's totally on fire. I think wrestling's more popular now than it's ever been before.
I agree.
The only difference between now and like the late 90s is just like there's so many more ways to consume the wrestling now.
Mhm.
When I grew up watching wrestling, the only way you could consume it was to watch it on Monday nights or watch it on Tuesday nights. I believe
Tape
SmackDown
tape it.
used to come on Tuesday nights,
Yeah.
didn't it? Um,
Yeah.
and VHS recorded, right? If you couldn't watch it. And that's when the ratings were just like, I mean, like super through the roof all the time. And but also now, there's so many avenues to make a living from wrestling without being signed to a major company. So I think with the amount of like indies that are out there and with the amount of exposure you can get simply by just promoting yourself on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and just all these various ways to promote yourself. Wrestling's on fire more than ever. And partnerships are always good, man. To be able to cross over. That's why the indies are so good, dude. Because like you can get all kinds of matchups done on the indies that you can't get done at TV because guys are working for different companies. And when companies start working together and people start crossing over and doing that type of deal, like Lauren said, it generates the buzz needed to get you the headlines and to get you more viewers watching your TV show.
No, definitely. And on the topic of ratings, Angelina, you mentioned it. The Beautiful People, when you were doing Spike TV, the ratings were through the roof, millions. I'd love to get into The Beautiful People and just hear about how that started, whose idea that was, and how you guys took it and ran with it.
Well, it was mine and Velvet's, because we had like when I was with WWE in Deep South, she had come in. We had done a couple random Philadelphia indies, probably back in like 03, 04. And she had come down for like a week tryout in Deep South. So like we knew of each other and and then when the Knockouts division started, I had probably been released from WWE like 4 months prior, I think.
Okay.
And then, Scott D'Amore was at TNA, Terry Taylor was at TNA, and I've known both of them. Obviously, Scott D'Amore ran Border City Wrestling, and I've been doing that since I was like 19. And Terry Taylor used to do the BCW shows all the time. So I think when they had heard that I got released, they had called me. Um, so yeah, I mean, Velvet and I were two of the originals. And so we were kind of just doing like, we were brought in as baby faces because I think they thought like, oh, blonde girl's baby face. Um, and we were just doing the singles stuff. They were kind of just trying to like introduce everybody because they had like 8 or 9 new girls that like one time come in. Um, and I think probably after maybe like 3 months of being there. We were, when they had first hired all the girls, they were pairing them up in hotel rooms and stuff like that. So her and I were always staying together because we knew of each other. When we would just like, we have the same silly sense of humor and we both like to do all the hair and all the makeup for TV and the glitter and the little outfits and stuff. So, we had a good amount in common and we were just like, there's got to be something that we can do that's different because every girl was just their own singular character. Gail's Gail, Tracy's Tracy, Kong's Kong,
Right.
ODB's ODB, you know what I mean? So we were like, oh, we should do like some kind of like girl gang, like group team thing. Um, and so we just kind of like decided to do that. And TNA had given us our new names, which we were both just horrified with when they first gave them to us. Obviously, they've grown on us now, but they were horrifying at first. And so we kind of just brought the idea to Vince Russo, and we always had a really good working relationship with Vince. I loved working with Vince. I got nothing bad to say about him.
I actually
And
just had him
he,
on like a week ago. I was just good, and he was awesome, like so polite. And yeah, I feel
how many
like if
times did he say bro?
I put a counter in the comments, I was like, if anyone guesses it, because I'm not counting, it must have been over a few hundred. Like,
That's funny. So we kind of brought the idea to him and he loved it. So then we were just like, oh, like we have to like figure out a name. So we were like, okay, I have a porn star name. She has a porn star name. We kind of look like them too. So we were like, oh, we should call ourselves Velvet Love Entertainment. Sounds like a porn company, right? So,
yes.
and like Mike Tenay, I think even said it a couple of times on TV, just like in passing, just in commentary. And then one day at TV, Vince Russo was like, "Oh, like we have your name, like the Beautiful People," and we were like, like we're gonna be a the. I didn't ever want to be a the, and we were like, that's so we thought it was so corny. But once again, it grows on you, and it ended up working. So, and then like anytime we ever had any ideas, all of our outfits were all of our own ideas. We just bounce everything off Vince. Vince always gave us the ball and let us run with it. He totally trusted us, especially with promos, backstage segments. So I mean, it just grew from there.
Wow. No, and it grew so well, and you guys kept evolving it too. I feel like so much creativity and really like touching into that character. Like you got great wrestlers as well, but like the character, I feel, and that's what Fodder and I were saying earlier, that you really remember when there's character and story to something. I feel like it definitely,
Well, and yeah, that was just very easy for us. Like, we're both very nice people, but
yeah.
for some reason, like being a heel, like, man, I'm just the worst baby face. Like, I just have to be Hulk Hogan in my head, and I have to be over the top and mega cheesy because it just doesn't come out of me naturally. And one of the best ways to be successful in wrestling is to come off as authentic in your character as possible, because the fans can tell when you're acting too hard or
Mhm.
when you're not feeling something you got to do. They can read it like a book. So for some reason, like being a heel just like oozes out of me very easily. And I think with her too, um, it was just a very easy thing for us to do. And I think we were just very believable, which
Yeah.
I think really helped. Because like, like the guys liked us because of how we looked, and like the girlfriends totally hated us. And then, like what, and then like some of the guys would hate us because maybe we looked like the girl they wanted to take to prom in high school, but she totally dissed them and whatever. So there was just a lot that could be done with it. And plus, we were like the really sexy, edgy ones.
Right.
And that was at a time when WWE was going PG. And it was just like, what we were doing in wrestling, I think you just have to have. I mean, it's like, look at the Attitude Era, like Sable with the hands. And do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, of
everything,
course.
all that stuff. It's just part of it. And so we just totally embraced it. It was just really easy.
Well, Fodder for you. So you're a few years into your career now, and like I said, Angelina's seven-time world champion, 20-plus year vet. I'm curious what it means for you to be able to run your stuff by someone. Also happens to be your wife, obviously, and being able to run your stuff by her, and any advice maybe you've been passed along.
We go over stuff a lot, just random stuff, on maybe if we're putting a match together or something like that, or maybe I'm going over ideas for a match. I might run something by her and say, "What do you think about this? How's this sound to you?" or whatever. And maybe she'll say it sounds great, or maybe she'll say, "Oh, this might be cool if you did this right here," or whatever. So I mean, we really play off of each other pretty easily. Um,
I mean, if you watch him work, you would think he is many years further along
Yeah.
than he is, right? Some people just get it very quickly. So like when we first got together and I was like he was showing me matches and stuff like that, it was like he gets the gist of it, but like I was like, here's where, well, you're called Psycho Boy, right? Okay, so like you have to be able to show in the ring why you are what you say your character is, right? So you're Psycho Boy. So like what makes you crazy in the ring? Like what is something like weird or crazy or psycho or whatever that you do or could do? Because you can wrestle, you know how to put a match together, you know how to have a match, you can wrestle, you can do the things, that's fine. Now we got to insert character into it so that you're not just a thing, and then when you go in the ring you're just wrestling, and then like you totally forget about your character, because I see that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm so big on character stuff because that was such a huge part of what I did, and what people remember and what made us successful. So I'm like, here, maybe like, slow this down, but like do something here that would make people go like, whoa, or just, so I just kind of helped him like piece character spots
Yeah.
into the matches, which I mean, he took on very easily.
yeah. Well, so like once I was at TV, and I remember, I think Homicide was the agent for the match. And Homicide came to me and said, "Yo, man," he goes, "We know you can wrestle, but we don't even care about that." He was like, "We don't care about the wrestling at all." He was like, "All we want you to do is just get your character over. That's it." He was like, "That's all we want." He's like, "We don't care about the wrestling at all." So I was just like, okay. So then we would kind of start developing like spots. Like there's a spot I do like where I break the guy's eyes on the ropes and I let him go and he kind of stands there and then I can kind of yak him back and he takes the bump there and then I roll backwards and I crawl to him with the tongue out and roll him over and start choking him,
Mhm.
and you can get a lot out of those character spots because then the commentators can put it over on commentary and then go, oh, look at the eyes, the tongue's out, he's absolutely crazy, whatever. There's a little combo spot that I would do the guys where I would snap them out of the corner and give them the Mr. Perfect neck breaker, a boot, and an elbow. And then I would go to her. She'd get up on the apron and lick my face. And I go, that makes me go wild, right? Those I got to where, because we were talking about earlier, right? Where like most matches on TV are like 6 minutes or less. Whereas like, man, like if I had 6 minutes, if I could do a cutoff and I could do those two spots, that's all I needed, dude. And then we can be getting ready to take it home, right? Because I could get so much mileage out of those two spots that that would almost cover 2.5, sometimes maybe 3 minutes of a match was those two spots. Or just doing something along those lines. And that really cuts down your workload in the ring too.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on that. Like the more you can have a character that you can portray, like you don't have to work as hard. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to do 1700 spots in your heat when you can just do three. But like really like jack with the crowd in between and like get your heat and let the person go off and sell for you. And like, because I would tell him like that's how we learned how to do beautiful people stuff and take our time because heels dictate the pace of the match. So when we would be at TV, we would have 4 minutes and it was like entrances, match. There was always some kind of afterbirth, I called it. Somebody runs down, there's cat fight, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we would go to and do house shows and we would have 10 minutes and we would be like, what I mean, like, what do we do to fill all that time? And then we would just kill so much time in the heat, just doing one thing and going over to the crowd, posing, giving each other air kisses, all that kind of stuff. And we weren't really working any harder than we would at TV. You don't want to be working harder at house shows than you do at TV,
No, of
you
course.
know?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you two both get it. I feel so well. Obviously, Angelina Fodder. Yeah, definitely. You seem like years above your time, I guess would be the way to put it. I mean, you've had some great moments. Angelina, do you have a favorite match that you've seen Fodder in that character really comes out, that work on display?
Well, I mean, his first pay-per-view match, like the kendo stick match with Latimer, I
Yep.
think
Yeah.
just had the most emotion and proud moments behind it because like that was like his first pay-per-view and he had to open it, right? So that's a big spot. Latimer's been wrestling for a real long time. Like the place is there's the energy and it's like, all right, man, like here we go. And if you just like watch how it starts, it's like Joe Galley, like the hype guy, you know what I mean? Like talking about it, and then it's just like blah 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 blah. And then it's just like boom, his music hits and out he comes. And I remember like me and EC3 were standing beside each other watching it in the back. Everybody's watching the monitor. And I just was like, we were like mom and dad, like we were so proud, you know what I mean? Because
That's
like
so
it was,
cool.
well, they just did so well. It was like the match went perfectly. It got great reaction. Nothing went wrong. You got the commentary with it too. It's live. And I mean, it was like such a proud moment because he did and Tom did such a great job. So for me, that was probably like the biggest, most memorable thing because it's like first pay-per-view, first match on the pay-per-view,
Yeah.
went seamless. It was great, set the tone for the show. That's a really big deal.
Fodder, did you know that they were watching like that backstage?
I mean, I figured
You
like
figure, yeah,
her and
yeah.
EC3 were watching. Yeah, yeah. I was watching too, because I mean she had the big no DQ match with Camille, and I knew of a few spots that were gonna happen in that match, and I was just like, hope you come back okay, you know.
Yeah.
Would like to look at you tonight and hope you look the same. So I mean, but that was definitely a good, definitely a fun pay-per-view for sure.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, and
solid.
I mean, and his match with Bubba was great too, just
Mhm.
because of this, just like the crowd interaction with the match. Like I've just always been such a mark for crowd reaction. Like I can, especially when you're a worker and you've been around it forever, when you can still get chills,
Ooh,
and the things are still like a big deal, and you're just like, ooh, like, oh, this is why I love this. Um, Definitely got the feels for that match too.
that's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, I knew that match, the Bubba match, went like perfect when I came into the back, and
Oh, it was a
you,
monitor sellout in the back.
Oh wow.
yeah. So I mean, I was just like, everybody was just like, yeah, it was totally awesome,
Yeah, and they
So
were pointing out pieces like, oh man, when you did this, like that was great, and like she did that, oh, it was a huge pop. It was just this thing that just it was like here, but it was like this, and it was just, I mean, like man, everybody was watching it in the back and just loved it. So that's great too,
yeah,
when your peers are watching and supporting, and that's a big deal. It's a good family atmosphere.
Yeah. No, that's a great moment. Angelina, if I could ask you some TNA specifics, someone I've heard over the years that you were close with in TNA was Kurt Angle. And a lot of people say he had his greatest run of his whole career in TNA. I'm curious what your thoughts on that are and just Kurt overall.
Oh, Kurt's great, and so is his wife Giovanna. And they were very supportive of me too. Very easy to talk to, very supportive. Uh, and like Velvet and I got to main event and Impact teaming with Kurt.
Yeah.
So that was that, and it's crazy because it was like Kurt's an Attitude Era guy, right?
Yeah.
So it's like all the Attitude Era people, it's like they got to experience pro wrestling at its height. Um, and so I mean, Kurt obviously, I mean, maybe his best run was in TNA, but I feel like everything he did in WWE was really
Oh,
good too.
it was
He's a
fantastic.
total,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a machine. So yeah, him and his wife were always super sweet and super supportive. He's good people for sure.
That's great. Who was like more of a locker room leader, would you say, in TNA? Was it someone like a Kurt Angle or someone who had really been or more there longer than Kurt?
Man, I don't really know who it would have been for the guys because it was just a really big team effort.
Mm,
So it was like everybody was cheering each other on all the time. I mean, like, and even the guys, like, that's what was really cool too, is like when us girls were getting the highest rated segments on the shows, like to our knowledge, there was no jealousy from the guys. The guys were uber supportive of the knockouts. You know what I mean? Like they were entertained by our segments. They knew we worked
right.
hard in our matches. And like they would give us like feedback, advice, constructive criticism when we would come back from our matches. And I remember like one time, like Sting gave us, it was like a tag match, and it was like me and Gail, and I can't remember who else it was. And I remember like Sting was, and we were all just standing there like, we're like, Sting watched our match and he's giving us feedback. Like, what is going on?
Oh, that's so cool. I can't even imagine. Yeah, there were so many big names and just veterans who were in and out of TNA constantly. So yeah, I imagine. Someone else I wanted to ask you about who's been killing in WWE for almost a decade now, which is crazy to think about, is AJ Styles. Another fixture of TNA. Like I said, what were your interactions with AJ?
Oh, AJ's so nice. Like, his wife and like their babies would come to shows sometimes, and he always was just a really nice, like down home, like country southern boy, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
just like incredibly talented. It was inevitable he was going to go to WWE and be super successful at some point. I mean, they would have been beyond foolish to have never tried to get him on their roster.
Yeah. Fodder, I know I've heard you say that there was a moment when you really stopped watching wrestling. Did you catch a lot of the TNA years though? Any of the TNA
I,
years?
I don't think I watched any TNA ever.
Oh,
I mean, maybe in passing I might have watched it, but when I met her, I didn't even know who she was.
really? Oh,
That
okay.
is semi true. semi
I
true.
mean, I knew she was a hot chick from Instagram that one time I had followed, and then
That's all you
okay,
needed. That's
yes, but as far as the wrestling, I had no idea who she was. You know, I had no idea when I first met Matt Sydal who Sydal was. Now I ended up training with Sydal a bunch. Um, but when I met him at the Control Your Narrative thing the first time, uh, me and him were chatting a bit, and I go, "Oh yeah, man." I said, "Man, you know, I heard you get around some," and he was like, "Little bit, yeah." So I mean, and I had like when I stopped watching wrestling was like during like that Evan Bourne era of like WWE. That was when I kind of quit watching it,
okay.
and it was crazy because like you know like all me and Seidel ever talked about was like supplements. And then like one day he just like hit me up. He was like, "Hey man, like I got a ring down here. Like if you ever want to like come train or like whatever." And then like I used to go down to Tampa, um, like about like every 6 weeks for a while. I was going down there, and I would go down there and I would train with like him and Fabu and all them. So I mean, I learned a ton from Seidel too. I mean, there's a really good match on my YouTube with me and Matt Seidel that people should check out. It's a really good match.
No, I'll link the channel below. It's Psycho Boy Fodder, right? YouTube.com/Psycho Boy Fodder.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. It's very professionally filmed and everything too. It's like a great channel. I was checking a bunch of matches out last night.
Thank you, bro.
I'm curious, Angelina, for you, do you still watch the current W product or AEW? Is there anyone that's catching your eye right now?
Man, I mean, like,
All we watch is bad wrestling.
yeah, one of our
That's all we
favorite things to
watch.
do is just find the most god-awful wrestling we can find on YouTube, and we'll just make a night out of watching it. And then there's the rabbit hole, right? Because it's like once you watch one bad video, it'll recommend just more bad videos.
So fun.
Um, I mostly just catch stuff on social media.
Okay.
Um, so I mean, like, we don't even really like sit and watch TV, to be honest. Like, we have like family movie night and stuff like that, but like, we're not actually usually like sitting down and watching like regular television channels. You know
Mm.
what I mean? So most of like what I catch is on social media. Um, but I mean, I think it's really cool for the TNA people that are being able to go to NXT and do what they're doing, like Jordan and Joe Hendry. You know what I mean? Like he's main evented like an NXT pay-per-view. Like that's
Wild.
incredible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he was doing like Ring of Honor shows with us before it got bought. He's a really nice guy, and you know what I mean? Like I'm sure he'll do great things. So and I'm happy for Camille. I hope she gets used right, because she's a really good person and she's really easy to work. So I hope she does big things too.
Yeah, no, there's so many great opportunities for really people in any company now, right? As long as you're making yourself stand out, it seems that you're getting the right chances. Well, Fodder, it was awesome hearing your journey for the first half, and now it's been really cool. I wish you nothing but the best. What are some short-term and long-term goals we could keep our eyes on for you?
I mean, short-term goals.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll do something at one of the three-letter companies sooner than later. Um, so maybe keep your eyes open for that. Just got to see how that pans out.
Yeah.
Um, long-term goals is just being good to my wife and being good to my stepson and keeping myself healthy and, you know, uh, spending time with my parents and her parents
Traveling.
and traveling and just all the things, man. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
listen, man, wrestling, we're all blessed to do it. And life, we're all blessed to live it, dude. So, you got to take it. My favorite thing to say is taking it one day at a time,
I'm gonna
baby.
make him a t-shirt that says that. He says
Does
it
he
every
say it
day.
a
Yeah.
lot?
One day at a time.
People always ask me, they say, "How you doing?" I just say, "Man, one day at a time." But,
Hanging in there, yeah. That's
yeah, that's
awesome.
it.
That laid back attitude is great. Well, Angelina, a bit of a different last question for you. 20 plus years in the business. If you could go back to young Angelina Love, what would you say to her as she's about to embark in this journey in the world of wrestling?
Um, I'm not sure because I don't think I would have changed anything that I did. You know what I mean? Because I was just surrounded by really good, really talented people from the get-go. I
Yeah.
had great training, like when I was training in Toronto. And then there was always groups of us driving from Toronto down to Nashville for TNA when they were doing the Wednesday pay-per-view. So it was like right away I was just surrounded by good people and getting to go to like the TNA shows and stuff. And then when I got hired by WWE, I was got a lot of developmental training and character promo stuff. So I think I think I would probably just like tell myself to be prepared because your career is probably going to be bigger and longer than you might think right now. Because I remember being very new in the locker room, like maybe like not even a year in, and being around somebody who'd been wrestling for 10 years. And I was like, 10 years. Oh my God, I can't even imagine what that would be like to have like be wrestling for 10 years. And I'm like walking into 25 now.
Oh, that's
So I
awesome.
would, yeah, I certainly wouldn't change anything. I
Yeah.
was just meant to do this from being a small child. Um, that's all I've ever, really all I've done my adult life outside of, random fitness stuff here and acting roles and stuff there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I would have given myself any different, advice.
You both seem really content, which is great. You one day at a time, and you wouldn't change anything. So that's awesome. You're in a you're in a great spot. And yeah, good luck to you on Psycho Love. And
Thank
thank you so
you.
much. Thank you so much for being courteous with your time too. I appreciate it.
No, it's no problem, bro. Thanks for having us on.
Good to see you
This is
again.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interviews.